Good evening and welcome to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and really excited to introduce the topic for tonight's show, sex, communication, and self-esteem, how to have a healthy sexual relationship. We have two fantastic guests joining us tonight. First, we have a local author, Jasmine Aziz. She's written the extremely popular book, Sex and Samosas, about sexuality from the perspective of a South Asian woman, and she's currently developing a TV show based on her own life. We also have world-renowned sex and marital therapist Sue McGarvie, who has written numerous books on sex and relationship issues and is also the former host of a radio call-in show called Sunday Night Sex with Sue. And she's also got a book coming out in 2016. What's your book called?
It's called The Suburban Hedonist, right? It's trying to find your way, in terms of sexuality in the new sexual culture.
When can we expect to see it later this year?
Great question. Yeah, I'm busy writing as we speak. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. So I wanted to start by asking you, ladies. I wanted to sort of kick off the show by asking you sort of the $64 million question. What does it mean to be a sexy man or a sexy woman? What does sexy mean to you, and how has that definition evolved over time and with your experience?
Well, I know from my personal experience, it's the one thread that brought my book together, because when I wrote the first draft, it was 1,200 pages of crap. And so I went to Vegas, and I was in Vegas, and I was looking pretty hot. I don't know if you've ever been to Vegas. Okay, so I had this Ralph Lauren.
Goes on there, stays there.
Yeah, exactly. Except that I was really quite innocent, but I was like, okay, I'm going to go there, finish my book. And I had this Ralph Lauren tankini on, which I thought was pretty lovely and risque, and a fedora, and I was looking smoking, sitting by the pool, and this guy comes over. These two girls he's handing out tickets to this club, right? And then these two girls come over, and they're so gorgeous. I'm starting to question my own sexuality. I was like, oh my God, they're beautiful. He gives them tickets, he's fawning over them, and I was like, I want to go to this club too. So I said to him when he turns around, I'm like, hey buddy, give me some tickets, right? I'm from Canada, I want to go. And he just looks at me and goes, ay mami, no you, not sexy. And I was like, yeah, I went upstairs and I cried for hours. Thank you.
God.
But I remember seeing my reflection in the mirror thinking, what made them more sexy than me? Like, what is that? And that was the actual moment that pin drops, when you realize that's what my book's about. So it's really about her trying to find her way. Because, I'm darker skinned, they were light skinned, they were blonde, they were petite, they were all the things on the surface that you would think are sexy. But for me, I was like, in my mind, I can run circles around them. I know what I'm doing. I'm, really qualified. I've done some stuff. So I know in that direction, I'd be fine, but I don't think they would. But that's not what society sees as sexy. So it really changes, and I think it's a lot to do with your personality. Because I remember doing this speed dating thing where that was my question, finish the sentence. For me, my definition of sexy is, and I got all gamut of answers, like you. That was, that's not, not a good answer, by the way.
Blow it.
And and a couple of other ones, some guy looked like he had duct tape in his car, and his answer was like, moving on, right? But it's an interesting thing, and I really think it's so personal. For me, it's sense of humor. Right. Like, I couldn't be with somebody who didn't make me laugh, and I'm with somebody who makes me laugh every day. He's awesome.
I say smart, kind, funny, smells nice, confident. Right?
So it's nothing to do with looks.
No, I think men are looking for a kind woman that looks good, that likes sex. That's what I think the men want. I think the women want all of those things. They want somebody to be able to finish a sentence. They want self-deprecating, right? It's not that I have a big car. It's I suck at volleyball, right? It's about, and I think it's about confidence, and I also think it's about the ability to flirt, right? So if you can't do any of that, that's what sexy is. I saw a woman who was pushing 400 pounds, who had all the guys lined up. And she was, she just really sexy, really confident, had that really smoky, deep voice, and was like, I've got it going on. And once you meet somebody like that, you're going, it doesn't matter what the rest of us, like, if she can do it,
she owns it.
She owns it. The rest of us can do it. So I think that's, in my opinion, what is sexy.
Do you think you're sexy?
Oh yeah.
Excuse me, Jazz. Yeah.
I don't know what my hair is doing right now, but I feel really good about myself.
How did you get to where you are today?
It took a long time. I'm not going to lie, and it's not like it happens every day. I look in the mirror and think, it doesn't happen that way. But I've gone through a lot of stuff in a short period of time that I've been on Earth, so I know that what really matters is not what I see in the mirror every day. It truly isn't. Because if it was, there are some things I would really like to change, and I'm just too lazy to change them, quite frankly. And I'm deeply in love, and I'd rather sit in bed and eat M&Ms than go to the gym. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
or be fed M&Ms. Also good.
Being sexy.
Yeah, exactly.
A little kiss. And you give yourself little kisses.
Exactly.
Yeah,
or,
yeah, yeah.
trails of M&Ms. Whatever
Trails of
works. As long as
M&Ms,
there's
right.
M&Ms, I'm happy.
All right. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but
Chocolate, just chocolate works for most
chocolate,
women.
period.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I do think it, but it's like, it's a work in progress. And I just go to bed every night feeling grateful. And I think that starts your day when you wake up in the morning, being grateful for everything. That's my key for everything.
What about you, Sue?
Do I feel sexy? I'm pushing 50. I feel better than I ever have. It's about understanding. It's about being comfortable in your skin, right? And that takes real work. That doesn't just happen. That doesn't, that doesn't just go, right? It's about saying, this is who I am. This is my authentic sexuality. I'm going to own it. I'm going to be really confident. I'm going to be feeling good about what I like and what I don't like. And anybody and you realize you're not going to please everybody, and if you're not like, size 0 and all of those things that you're expected to be, and I feel really badly for women that, that have to do that. It's a process. You know what helped me the most? I said, honestly, nude beaches. I tell people, give that a try, right? Because you can see women who've had mastectomies, you can see just go on holidays, dip your toe in, and just because you realize that, you know what, they're all bodies and it doesn't matter.
I know there's a nude beach in Vancouver. Is there one closer to home?
Oh yeah, there's 3 nude communities in the area where you can do nude camping. You don't do it in January, but you do go. There's a lot of, there's actually quite a bit. There's a lot in Quebec. There's one that's, one of the biggest in North America, a few hours away. Yeah, there's lots of stuff. Road trip, yeah, exactly. I can hook you up. It's all good. Yeah.
And nudism isn't actually about sexuality.
Not
it's
at
just
all.
about sort of feeling comfortable in your own skin.
Well, it's I think it's sensuous, right? It's sun on your skin, it's the wind, it is feeling comfortable in your own skin, and it's about understanding that it's not about sex, it's about feeling comfortable. And people have different views on how that goes, but it really does go. I remember the first time in the Caribbean and looking, there's like 10,000 naked people, and nobody cares about me or my stretch marks, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. And for those of our viewers who may not feel quite comfortable to go to a nude beach, just look around in the locker room, right? Or at the gym, look at some real bodies.
Except that you can sometimes feel that those people are posing, and that, you've just, those sort of gym scary stories where you're expected to be, perfect people. It's not. It's about realizing that you are more than your numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also that you don't realize what someone else is going through. Like, it's very nice to look at somebody who looks perfect and think, oh, if only I had those legs or those arms or whatever, I would be happy. And I remember I did a party in Toronto. I just left my jackass boyfriend, and I was with these models. I'm talking like Amazonian, literally models, all of them. And I walked in, I'm like 5'1". They're all 6 feet tall and drop dead gorgeous. And they were utterly lacking in self-esteem.
Oh, and they all thought their thighs are too fat. Right?
All of them. One
all
of them, she comes into my sales room and she said, she's like, Jasmine, I need the crotchless panties because I have to have something to wear during sex. I never have sex without a t-shirt on. I'm like, are you kidding me? I would grocery shop naked if I had your body. And people would applaud me everywhere I go.
Standing ovation.
But to me, I couldn't fathom it, but I could see how painful it was for her and the competition she has with herself. Like, that's the worst part. I think once you realize you're only competing with yourself and it's not worth it because you're never going to win, just let it go. Be yourself. Be happy. And it's so attractive. I find it hugely attractive.
That's a good segue to something I wanted to bring up in the show, which is a blog post on your blog on jasmineaziz.com, where you have a photo of yourself.
Right.
Maybe we can bring up that photo right now to show. How old were you when that photo was taken?
So I'm 47 now. I probably was like 35.
Okay.
So 12 years ago.
Okay, and you were a size 4 in this photo.
Size 4, maybe a bit smaller. I don't know what happened to that skirt. I really missed that skirt. But I was miserable in that picture, as good as I looked.
You look smoking hot. You look like you should have been having the time of your life.
I should have been. And it was my first long-term relationship, and I thought, this is what he wants. This is, I was with somebody who was very into weightlifting and bodybuilding and body image. And he looked at that picture and thought, well, if you just worked on your triceps a little bit more, and you just lost a little bit more weight. And I was thinking, what? But, okay,
so
maybe he's right.
You still weren't good enough for him.
No, I wasn't good enough for me either. And then, you go through that horrible period where you're blaming that other person when you break up. And it's not until I realized I'm the one who let somebody else make me feel that way. So it's my responsibility. And so, words hurt, and he's still a jackass. That doesn't change. But at least I got a book out of it, and I got to grow out of that experience. But on paper, and it's also for the cultural balance, because my skin tone wasn't the same as everybody else's in school. I always never looked quite like everyone else I went to school with. There were no brown kids when I went to high school.
Really?
Yeah, I think there were 2 black kids in the school, the whole school. So I didn't fit in ever. So then, trying to pigeonhole me into something just made it worse.
Interesting that there was no real correlation between how good you looked and how good you felt about yourself.
Yeah, none. No.
There's
And you're
lots-
not getting affirmation anywhere either.
I got lots and lots of clients who are really beating themselves up because they're not this, and they're, you can live on saltines and green tea for a while, and you're just not happy. You're not comfortable, and you said more than your numbers. If you get down to a certain number, it's going to be perfect, and it never ever is. And the universal truth about women is that we all have body image issues. I think we all blame ourselves for everything, and we're all a little crazy, especially when we're hormonal. Then we're really crazy. But it's again trying to amplify that, and trying to figure out how you're supposed to be sexual, and how again, what is that authentic sexuality? And you're just like, I just want everybody to like me, and I want my partner to love me, and it takes a while. I said it settles down at 40, but it takes a while to find what that looks like for you.
Jasmine, you were born in Ottawa.
Yes.
Your family's originally
From Bombay,
from
India.
Bombay, India. How has being a product of 2 cultures? How has that affected your views of intimacy and
That's
sexuality?
probably the worst part. So that's why that's where I struggle. And the book is really about finding cultural balance, because when I was in India, I was 21, a virgin, and trying to get married, have an arranged marriage. My grandmother was trying to set things up, and I will never forget this one auntie of mine said, "Don't let him do anything to you. Just lie down and don't scream." And I was like,
scream.
yeah, don't scream. And then just go make the dal. You want the dal recipe? And I was like, first of all, what are you talking about? Like, and then I realized she was talking about sex.
How traumatizing.
It was horrible. And there's that moment where you look at that person and think, that happened to you too, right? This is your life. This isn't just what you're telling me to do. And it's horrifying, right? I actually put that in my book because it really did traumatize me. I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to make dal. What am I going to do?
Lie back and think of India.
Right? What do I do? And then I come here and my North American friends are dating, and I wasn't dating. Also, I had one eyebrow and big glasses, and I really wasn't in any position to be dating. But I didn't do that. I used to go home in high school and eat lunch with my mother in high school, right? So, but that's cultural for me. That was my thing, So it was really hard. It's really, really hard finding balance because I didn't feel comfortable over there and I didn't feel comfortable over here. So it took me a long time to say, there's good things in this, there's good things in that, there's bad. I'm just going to take what I like. And then there's me. Ooh, I like me.
Yeah, we
That took a long
all
time.
had those terrible high school experiences.
Yeah.
It may not have been eating with my mother, but it was, yeah.
I love
I had the big 80s hair. Yeah.
Oh, did you?
That relationship with your first long-term boyfriend, was he also Indian?
No. German, French, Canadian.
Okay.
Didn't understand my culture at all. Loved Indian food, and then
Sure.
he thought that made him, appreciative
Cultural.
of the culture. Yeah, that's not enough.
So how did you get to the point where you decided to write this book?
So I left him and I was thinking, I remember there was a Bollywood bachelorette party that I did, and there were 16 stunning women, all Indian.
And just to clarify for our viewers, the parties that you did were sort of adult toys, lingerie,
themed toy, yeah,
things
lingerie,
like that. Yeah.
bath products, that kind
How
of thing.
did you get into that?
That's a funny story too, because I was at a party with my girlfriend and I didn't know anybody there, and I was dating him at the time, and he's from Montreal, so I was like, this is fine. It was really my first long-term relationship. I didn't need it, but 5 women I've never met came and asked me for advice at the end of the show because I was just making jokes. Everybody was really uncomfortable. It was a horrible show. So I started making jokes, and then these women came in their late 40s, 50s, and I was in my early 30s at the time, saying, I'm trying to spice up my sex life. What should I do? And I was like, what are you asking me? I don't know you. Yeah. And so that's when I started to realize I think I should start selling this stuff because I've always had sales in my blood, right? Mm-hmm. But then when I started to do the parties, I started to realize women actually need this information in a palatable way so that they don't feel embarrassed. They could read this on the bus and think, I'm getting information without realizing it because they're laughing and they're not thinking about it. So when I did the Bollywood bachelorette party, that's when I really made up my mind. I have to do this because these women were exactly in the same spot as me, caught between these 2 cultures, trying to make their parents happy, trying to have a relationship, raising their children here in North America. And it's just really difficult. Again, they cried. Almost all of them cried. Almost a lot of them had suffered from female genital mutilation, right? Which is something that nobody talks about openly, but it's part of the culture.
Which culture was this?
This is the Indian culture. But this was happening in North America.
I didn't realize that Indian women underwent female genital mutilation.
Not every
as
culture
well.
does, but
Okay.
yeah, there's a lot of cultures. It's not just Indian. It happens right here in North America. So, and it's still considered That's the only way to make a woman clean and control her. And so I was like, this is I have to stop this. I don't know what else I can do. And I was literally crying with almost all of them. They all had a story that I could relate to, and that's why I said I have to do something. And then writing's always just been a way, like I'm sure you can attest to this, to just get your stuff out and have your own therapy. It's cathartic. You can
Absolutely.
You can see yourself and say, oh man, I'm a mess. Turn the page. Keep going. But you get through stuff that way, right? I do.
And that's really honest of you. I only write fact, right? I'm not touching that, right? Just in terms of your life, and that's really empowering to be able to say. And I said, if you can tell stories about that, right, as opposed to examples, and and the one thing about having been on radio for so many years, right? It's you literally talk to 10,000 people about sex, and you get a sense of
The patterns,
well,
right?
what's going on. I said I did a lot of started in Ottawa, so I'm from Ottawa, right? So it's Barrhaven and Orleans and and Canada, and understanding what's going on in the bedrooms, right? That the suburban hedonist kind of thinking about where that's going and why people feel wrong, right? And whether it's a cultural thing, but everybody, and I mean everybody. I've been a sex therapist for well over 20 years, and it's based in Ottawa. And everywhere I go, people think, "Oh yeah, you're from Ottawa. What do you mean people in Ottawa don't have sex?" And I'm like, "You are so wrong." But it's this idea that you are, you need to find how you fit, but everybody's got something, whether they're worried they're a mutant or worried that they're a sex fiend or worried that they've something that they're a little kinky about. It's like, there's something wrong with me, but everybody's got something. It's
true.
And it's about finding a way to be comfortable with it, right? If it's safe and consensual, whatever, right?
People are always worried about what their community will think of them, right? And just to go back to you, I'm curious as to what your family thought when you were in the process of writing this book and when you were publishing it. I mean, I'm scared to tell my mom that I'm hosting this show, quite frankly.
I think she would be very proud of you, because I am. I had a long conversation with my mother, and she's like the most incredible woman in the entire universe. And she flat out said, you can write anything. Why do you have to write about sex? I said, okay, thank you for the compliment, but I really feel that it's, whether I like it or not, people will tell me things that they won't tell anyone else. And when I was doing my parties, I do couple parties, they would tell me all kinds of things, and I would say, I'm not a therapist. I was trained from the get-go not to be counseling people, but if they're telling me, then this has to be the reason I'm doing this. And I'm very comfortable talking about it. I don't have a problem with it. I'm very open talking about everything that happened to me, because I think the worst feeling you can have in the world is feeling that you're alone. And I just feel like it's just like Sue was saying, everybody has some feeling that they're wrong, and they're not. It's just because you're comparing yourself to somebody else. So I plunged ahead and did it anyway.
Yeah, and you got stories, and it's great that great that you get supported by it. It's a lot of people. I see, as I said, I spend my days as a therapist talking to people who've been beat up sexually, or I say you sit around the dinner table, you talk about politics, the neighbor's dog, what's going on the X-Files is out, all that new stuff, and you never talk about sex. You learn that there's something inherently bad about it. So you have this sort of this silence about it, where it's the second most powerful drive after food. So once your tummy's full, you're thinking about sex, but you don't have a safe way to explore that. And it tends, if you're not able to look at it, it can either pop up in an inappropriate way, or you shove it down like crazy.
And it starts in childhood. We're conditioned, right?
We're conditioned, right? You see, you take diapers off 2-year-olds, and they're like, "Oh, look, my first and favorite toy. Look at that," right? Yeah. And then if you tell them early enough and often enough, no, stop, bad, you learn that nice girls don't. You learn that message that that's what you can't do, or nice, it's just, and I said, and when you have a culture that's changing as fast as ours, I remember starting in radio, in the mid-90s, and people had no internet, there was really no great sex education, so it was like, if I touch her arm, is she going to get pregnant kind of calls, and then boom, you start getting the questions that were really hardcore. Family Hour, we're not going to ask those, but it goes from there, and then now it's I want to do the gamut, and I need to be looking like a porn star or doing that kind of stuff. And I'm telling you, I've been on a porn shoot. I've been invited to watch it. The first 5 minutes is sex. The rest of it's work, and it's not
sexy.
It's not sexy. It's not intimate, and it took them a whole day to shoot that scene. And if that's what you think sex is, boy, that's not how real women respond. I don't touch your elbow when you have you go into throes of orgasm, right?
And give me 5 minutes.
Having a great conversation, ladies. I'd love to talk more about it when we get back from the break. Sure. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Good evening and welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and tonight we're talking about how to have a healthy sexual relationship with sex therapist Sue McGarvie and local author Jasmine Aziz. So we were talking about all sorts of things in the last few minutes, and I wanted to ask you both your opinion on this. Would you agree that the cardinal rule of having a healthy sexual relationship is to have a healthy relationship with yourself first?
Field that one. You go
Okay,
ahead.
absolutely.
You have some thoughts on that.
That's my thing. I honestly think that if you can't please yourself, you can't expect someone else to do it, because we don't come with handbooks. I mean, this is not a handbook, no matter how much I try to sell it. Everybody's different, every human being's different, and I think this is the problem that a lot of women run into, especially because they don't know their bodies well enough, because they can't see their sex organs the way men can, and they've got to make a physical effort to go and find out, oh, that's what it looks like, and there's shaming, like, there's all that stuff that goes with it. So if you understand how you work and you like having yourself feel good, then it'll translate to whoever you're with.
Right.
Because you have to be able to tell them. It's like driving a car. I can't, if you don't know how to drive a stick, I teach you, otherwise you're going to crash my car.
Right. You can't play with your own equipment. It's hard to play with somebody else's. On the other hand, it's, I have women who think, I have to have it all figured out before I can have sex. And I'm like, not so much. You can make it up as you go along a little bit, but in order to have great sex, I tell people, if you make love 10 times, twice should be amazing, out of the park, twice should be why the hell did we bother, and 6 times should be that was nice. So people have this expectation that they have to have themselves all perfect, and I'm like, not so much, right? It's about figuring out, what you like, what you don't like. But you ask men about fantasies. And they'll give you a list, right? 2 women, 3 women, hanging from the chandelier. You ask women what they want, they have no idea. So I have to go, okay, dressed up like Little Bo Peep, on the kitchen floor while the cookies are baking, the hunky firefighter, and they're like, no, oh, that one, pick me, right? So you sometimes don't know, and it's not, as long as you're safe and consensual, sometimes it's ready, fire, aim. Because it doesn't have to be perfect. But if you can't tell, like Jasmine said, if you can't tell your partner harder, faster, deeper, slower, to the left, to the right, please touch me here, it's hard because people don't know, and it makes them really uncomfortable. Because we come from this place where we never talk about sex, talking about sex, you'd rather cut off your left arm. So to be able to say, this is what I want, is really, really difficult. And people, who've been together for 50 years still have challenges with that. And it's becoming a way to say, I want this in a little voice, but to really know that sometimes takes a little bit of courage. And I always, my bumper sticker is life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. So try and, put a toe over that.
Do you think that we're a prudish society here in North America? I mean, you wouldn't think that, because we have access to so many things, Cosmo sex tips and images and accessibility to all kinds of information, but are we in North America, in fact, a prudish society?
I wouldn't say, the definition of prude, I wouldn't say, because it exists everywhere, right? Every culture has somebody who doesn't want to talk about it at all. And it happens even in my own family. Like, there's people who just, I don't want to talk about that. It's the same house, it's the access to wrong information that can make you think, I don't want to do that, I'm not doing that, I'm not comfortable with that. And then there's the stigma attached to being a woman and saying, I do want that, or you're too aggressive, she scares me, I must run away. I must find somebody who's timid and I can control, or something like that. But that exists in every culture. I've done parties for Greek women, I had 28 Greek women in the same room screaming at the top of their lungs, and they just berated their partners. It was the most hilarious thing. I didn't get home till 4 o'clock in the morning. But they really taught me something about how every single culture has the exact same issue, and it stems from the inside of every woman.
I don't know about prudish. I think it runs the gamut. The minute I start thinking there's one size fits all, the minute I'm dead in the water.
For sure.
So I think that what's going on is you need to it's changing again, changing really quickly, but finding a way to say, this is what I'm comfortable with and this is what I'm not, and that you see it all. And you go, I'm supposed to be something that I'm not necessarily. So I find that's really interesting when you're not sure how you fit in, and it's a way to say, I want to do this. And again, it's about trying stuff, and it doesn't always work out, but trying stuff in terms of what is prudish. And I think culture is changing, as you said. And we're not one culture, right? Canada's as multicultural as they get.
Absolutely.
And I think if you start blanketing people with that, but we get them bombarded with sexual images every day, and that's what we're expected to be. And I'm like, no, right? It's about finding who you are, what's your authentic sexual self. And as I said, I'm convinced that people fall into this gamut, right? That women fall into one of 4 categories, right? 25% don't like sex at all, 25% could take it or leave it a couple times a month, 25% like it a regular amount, right? Statistically average twice a week, and 25% are like men would like it every day. And I think that happens, right? And most men, if you're a healthy adult male, will be, saying I'd like it every day or every other day. But I think that there's a lot of women who are trying to find what is normal, and they think that what they should do is, again, be this really crazy sexual creature. And, you've got cooking, cleaning, laundry, childcare, try not to stick to the floor, and you're supposed to be a sexual person on top of all that. It can be exhausting. So, and I call prudish is what I call your sex quotient, right? You have an IQ, you have an EQ, your emotional quotient. I think it's your sex quotient, your SQ. And people aren't born being, anti-prude. You have a sex drive that's normal for you, but you can work on it, right? You can information, you can start talking about it, you can go to parties, you can get sex toys, you can really do things that make you less prudish or less sort of scared about what that looks like.
I just want to remind our viewers tonight that if you'd like to call in with some questions, you're welcome to call the number at the bottom of your screen, and our experts will be happy to answer them. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts tonight on these topics. I just want to go back to what we were talking about earlier. Why is it so difficult for a couple, for 2 people in a committed relationship who share a home, who may have had children, who share so many things, who share their lives together? Why is it so difficult for them to say to each other, this is what I want?
Because they're afraid they're going to be thought of as freaks and their partner's going to leave them or laugh at them or be told that they're wrong or say, I'm never going to do this, because sex is close to the bone. It's who you are as a real person. It's where you're most vulnerable. It's why sexual abuse is so powerful. So if you're showing your most private self, it's really scary. And even to the person that you're doing all of that with, especially to the person you're doing all that with. So, because you're going to get beat up or, emotionally, or be told that you're wrong. And it's really private and it's really difficult. So it's about finding a safe place to do that.
Yeah, I think you're looking at, like, when you're in a long-term relationship and you're with the same person after a long period of time, and you see them at their ultimate worst. When you're bringing up something that you're really raw when you're coming to somebody and saying, I'd like to kind of try this. If they're not on the same page as you, it's a big conversation. And then I think you can assume a lot about your partner when you've spent a lot of time with them. I think I know how this person's thinking, and they probably won't go for it, or they'll think I want to cheat, or they'll think that I'm restless, or that I'm not happy with them. And those are conversations that, if you're in a really healthy, intimate relationship, you can have intimate conversations about what you like about that other person. Always make them feel secure. Then you can make those leaps. It's easier. But it's really hard to communicate with somebody in some relationships if you're not on the same page. That's what I found in my past relationships, that there are times where sex can be off the charts, but I just want to leave right afterwards. I don't want to talk to anybody. I can't make a conversation with this person, and there's no intimacy, and that's damaging.
Communication is challenging at the best of times, let alone sexual communication. People do it, when you're in bed, and that's really vulnerable. What do you mean you didn't like this? Or, I tell people to do it when they're having a walk, or someplace when they can't have sex, right? What is that? It's about finding, sexual communication and being able to say, just being able to tell somebody. And it's not something where you say, we need to have the big talk. It's little but teachable moments, right? When we talked about teaching kids about sex, it's little teachable moments. I'm like, okay, we saw this sitcom, did you get what was going on here? Or, did just little things, when you see the billboard, do you know what that means? Or how did that go? Your friends, she's wearing something, her older sister, it's a little more provocative. How do you feel about that, right? So it's little moments that you can do through your relationship, as opposed to saying, we need the sex talk, because everybody wants to run for the hills, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I used to sell this stuff, and I'd come home with like $1,600 worth of stuff, and I couldn't have that conversation. So I just didn't know how to start that conversation. He was just not open to it. And I start say, could we just no, okay. So it must be me.
Right. You were the shoemaker whose wife goes barefoot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Alas. Well, I'm saving that for my TV show. Can I quote that?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
So how do you tell your clients how to cultivate desire in a relationship? And is it unrealistic to expect your body to have this instantaneous reaction?
I think that people try hard, right? If the one thing about I see a lot of people who are successful at what they do or whatever it is they do, and they just have to work harder to get that. Sex is never like that. You can't push harder to have an orgasm. You can't push harder to have sexual desire for somebody or develop chemistry. Like none of that works. Sex is said and it amplifies whatever's going on in your relationship, right? So if it's not clear, you cannot work harder. You have to find your way in terms of doing that and finding desire. The biggest question I get from women over 30 is, how do I keep it hot? How do I keep it hot? I thought of having sex with the same guy for the next 30 years makes me want to run screaming into the night, right? Because it's not that interesting, it's not that passionate, and how am I going to do this and stay monogamous when I don't feel, I'm not feeling sexy, they're not helping, and it's not. So it's about how do you make it hot? And biggest question I get from couples is where do you do that? And I know that you must have seen that.
I've seen that when I used to do couples parties all the time. It's never about the socks on the floor. No one's ever fighting because that person left their socks on the floor. But if you start with understanding how sex works and that a woman's sex organs are brain and not the rest of it, and you start there, then it makes more sense. Because then I used to say in my couples parties, foreplay for a woman is if you empty the dishwasher. She asks you to empty it, you empty it, she comes home and she doesn't see it empty. It's not about the dishes in the dishwasher. It's about respect, and you don't respect my time and the rest of that. So a text message saying, I can still remember how you felt in my arms. Also, could you pick up the dry cleaning? Would help a little bit, right? And you're laying the groundwork, because then you've got 30 years of excitement ahead of you, and you're slowly opening doors together. And then your journey, in my opinion, is together. Right, you're also changing as a woman too. I know I'm getting into my 50s, and my body's not doing what it used to do. Graciously. So I make adjustments. You have to make adjustments.
Yeah, and that's the second biggest question I get from that all the doctors that refer to me say. I ask them what are the big things that you go to your doctor, your GP, and number one is low libido, and number two is this expectation that sex is going to stay the same. Right, you're 19, you get guys, you get hard in a stiff breeze. Women, like it's going to just be easy, except that it changes. You get pregnant, you get you're nursing, you hit menopause, you have prostate cancer. Like it changes, and it ebbs and flows. And if you can't shift, if you can't evolve, you can't roll with stuff, and you think it's going to be in, out, repeat if necessary for the rest of your life, you're going to be sorely mistaken. So because it's not going to be the same, and so you have to be able to say, okay, it's not the same. What can I do about it? And a lot of it's pragmatic. I tell people as a therapist, I see it the same way I do when my computer breaks down. My computer breaks down, I freak out, I say some bad words, and I try and fix it. And now I learn, you just call the nerd guys, they come in with their little nerd machine and they fix it, and you put heads together, solve the problem, you get on with your life, right? And so sex can be like that. You do solutions and look at how do you solve the problem, and you don't have to muddle through it for 5 years, because people are, and they're doing it quietly, and because it's so personal, and because it sort of permeates their whole life. You must have seen that, but it becomes sort of they spend a lot of brain space thinking about it.
When it's the problem, it's the biggest problem. It really is. And I think a lot of the problem has to do with comparing yourself to Jane and Jessica next door, because you think that they're hanging off the chandeliers and doing all that. They're not. And I believe there's a gamut of different types of sex. There isn't just one type of sex, right? You can get into tantra, you could go into costumes, you could do all kinds of things, right? If you're open to it, there's millions of things you can do to change things up, to shake your whole world up, right? If both of you are on the same page and you're traveling at the same speed, which is about your intimate life too.
Which doesn't happen, right? So different sexual desires, though, is a huge problem, right? That you want it twice a month and he wants it 4 times a day, or vice versa, which happens more and more than you think. That's a challenge in trying to find that balance. And as long as you're on the same page and going in the same direction,
balance is key.
Right? I have a lot of people trying to figure out, how do we be sexy, and I want to explore a little bit that may be what we call monogamish, which is, just kind of be flirty but safe, and how do you do that? And they're like, wow, we don't know how to negotiate this. And that's, those are skills that most people don't have, because you don't have the, you don't have the tools to do that.
Right. Yeah, and that's part of being in a good relationship too. That takes time, right? You're building blocks in all of your areas of life, so that becomes another part of it. So and when it's a problem, it's a big problem. It's not a small problem. But comparing yourself to other people is the number one way to mess yourself up. And that happens a lot because of misinformation too. Women lie to each other, men don't talk to each other. It's an ongoing issue, right?
Yeah.
It's more pervasive.
Well, I have people who really want to be the sexy couple, right? Everybody wants to be the sexy couple. They want to know they're having way hotter sex than the neighbors. You know, and said, I was telling you earlier about my group. I have a group called the Ducklings, which started because I kept going, okay, everybody gather around, don't get lost. And my husband called them my Ducklings, and it stuck. I said, before we could be cool like the Raptors, we became the Ducklings, which is sexy date nights, because their idea of a lot of people's was dinner, movie, dinner, movie, dinner, movie, and the women were like, something different.
Exhausting.
It's exhausting trying to plan it, but they didn't know what to do. So basically, it was sexy date nights for couples, and we've got quite a few singles who are just but it's about fun and community and safe and adventures, but feeling sexy in a safe way, right? Not the crazy people, not we're not Rotary. It's kind of in the middle
And non-judgmental.
And non-judgmental, but it's so we have 3 rules, right? No mean people. Mean people are so they get tossed. No sexual aggression, and no drama. So it's just about fun adventures. So when that happens, it's about finding a way to be playful, because sex is adult play, and it ties into what you're saying, right? That you want to be that sexy couple, you don't know how. So can you find a way to be playful? Because this is playing in the sandbox. This is adult play, and it's sex.
And it's play. And that's the most important thing too. We're allowed to play for the whole life. It should be fun.
And if it's not fun, why the hell are you doing it, right?
Yeah.
Because then people are like, and I'm doing it because I'm taking one for the team, or I'm mailing it in because my partner wants. This is what they want.
Speaking of taking it for the team, should you have sex with your partner even if you don't want to? Does that become a slippery slope just for the sake of the marriage or the relationship to please the person?
But then you can empty the dishwasher too, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, Oprah did a study where she had a couple of sex therapists on. They said, okay, sex every day for a month. By the end of the month, the women were super resentful. What do you mean? Like they just they said they took one for the team and said, we're going to put out every day, because that's what their partners were asking for. And they could, except that seriously, by the end of the month, they were so mad and so resentful. And I tell, and I said it's different for women and men, right? I tell people, sex from 10,000 feet looks funny. It's sweaty guy and ooh. But it's not, it's trying to find a way to do that, and you need to feel it. So I tell people, you got to get your libido to where it needs to be, because if you don't want it, you're gonna get out of the end of it and go yuck, and you never ever want to do that, because it shuts the door, slams the door on your own pleasure, and it really makes you resentful.
Yeah, it would harbor a lot of resentment. The same way if you were the sole person doing all the cooking, doing all the cleaning, always putting out, always doing this, you're going to end up saying, why exactly are you here?
Well, and that was what Oprah found. It was like women were saying, I'm doing all of this, and then I've got to be the sex kitten in the bedroom. It's like, wait a minute, it's exhausting. It's like, but I need, we need, but again, didn't know. And guys are clueless. Like, I think guys are loyal. I think they genuinely want to please. I know they're biologically and fundamentally attracted to newness. So you come out in the red wig pretending you're Mimi the French mistress, they'll be all over that. And they really at times need to be told 2x4, this is what works, okay, or this is important to me, and this is what makes you feel sexy. And then, as I said, and then you've got to say, you got to make the effort to do that. And I said, I did an article that said, if you can't spend a minimum of 3 hours a week talking about things that aren't kids and work, relationships have a really hard time making it, right? 53% divorce rate in this city, according to the Regional Health Department. My sister-in-law is a brilliant divorce lawyer, and it's and 64 on second marriages. So, it's a failing experiment at times, right? Monogamy generally, and that's where it said that's culturally that's changing. But I think it's really hard for people to say, this is what I want, and be able to find a challenge to make that and to communicate that. So you've got all of that happening all at the same time while you're trudging to work in the snow and dealing with kids and homework and trying, and depression and low vitamin D, and it's the middle of winter and you're just like, enough. Yeah. And you want me to be this, as I said, you want me to get dressed up and find the black and red lingerie and, rock your world, like, gentle, right? Yeah, you need to dip a toe in, try new things. And as I said, it's a sex quotient, it's a process. And you can do that with
absolutely.
your toys.
Yeah, you can do that in so many different ways. Absolutely. And I think the stigma needs to be removed from trying to do other things. And that stigma of being in a relationship and I'm stuck here, that needs to be removed. And then you can open up to other things.
And I want to hear more about that and start the conversation about libido, both men and women, and what's going on. Is it sort of an epidemic? Because we're starting to see more and more of that. So when we come back from the break, don't go away. We'll talk all about that and more. Make sure you call in with your questions. Good evening and welcome back to Ottawa Experts. I'm your host, Barbara Balfour, and we're talking about how to have a healthy sexual relationship. Don't forget to call the number at the bottom of your screen if you've got any questions for our experts tonight. They're excited to hear from you. The New York Times reported last year that Google searches for sexless marriages were 3.5 times more common than Google searches for unhappy marriages. And Chatelaine reported that 31% of Canadian women are having sex less than once a month. So I wanted to ask you ladies, is this an epidemic? Is this something that's recent, or are we just hearing more about it than we ever have before? Are we just starting to talk about it more?
I think that women are really, like, low libido is you go to any sex therapy convention, it is the topic du jour. Everybody, that different sexual appetite or low libido, right? There is, one of my books is on low libido syndrome. It's called The Libido Diet, because I kept seeing the same woman over and over and over again, right? She'd come in, good marriages with good guys, should be finding a flat surface to christen everywhere, and not, saying they would rather clean the toilet. It's like eating their least favorite food. They really didn't want to have sex with these awesome hot guys. And there was a bunch of things going on. They tended to be, they tended to have food allergies. They, they do their blood work, their vitamin D, their B complex, their magnesium is low. They have, they have markers, so there's some of that going on. Yeah, they tended to have all been on the birth control pill. They've often been on antidepressants. They tend to be petite, right? Because belly fat's a source of estrogen, and it keeps us kind of juicy, and so there's a whole lot of things that are fine. And I'm finding the same woman who has, so physiologically, because if you have a guy come in for erectile dysfunction, I don't say it's all in your head. Mm-hmm. So immediately for women, it's like, oh, you need to light some candles, which just makes me want to stab a plastic fork in my eye. But anyways, it's got to be more than that. So for women, it's sometimes it's in a lot of cases it's physiological, but it's more than that. It's he's not doing the dishwasher.
Yeah, exactly. It's always more than that. There's always something underneath the surface, and you've got to dig in and get what's in there.
It's emotional,
absolutely.
It's psychological.
Yeah,
it's not about popping a pill.
Exactly, and it's been going on for years. I just think
years.
we're now, with the awakening of TV and so much you can see, shows are like Two Broke Women. I was watching that when my partner was in the hospital having a surgery, and I can't get over the explicit content that they cover on TV now, right? So there's a lot more access to people talking, and especially women talking about Sex in the City. And I'm not crazy about that show, but it did open a lot of doors.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Right. So we're talking about it more, but it's always existed. It's always been around.
And I think it's more amplified, right? I think people are really busy. They're exhausted. Their adrenals are burnt out. They're not feeling, like I said, it's not being abundantly healthy, because there's a lot of people who are not, right? So and it's interesting, because the first thing that you do when you stress out any female mammal is they stop going into heat, right? So hunters get this.
Feeling desire.
Well, hunters get this immediately. Too many deer in Algonquin Park. There's no babies because they're stressed. Mm-hmm. So you stress out women, at a cellular level, like they're just stressed and their biochemistry's off. First thing that happens is they stop going into heat. And they don't want sex. And I'm saying you have to address that, because it doesn't matter. You can have all the lingerie in the world, because if you don't find out what's going on, the good news is it's quite treatable. It's just the bad news is that you got to figure out what it is. Is it physiological? And we got to look at blood work and talk to your doctor and do a bunch of those tests. Is it your relationship? Do you want to strangle your husband and bury him in the backyard? Is it an emotional, psychological? Are you one of those tormented Catholic girls or Indian girls or whatever?
Yeah.
Or is it what I call the habit of sex? Are you, you're working too much, or you got the TV in the bedroom, you're busy, not finding time to be sexual, right? If you don't find time in your week, you're a hockey mom or whatever, we schedule it in our house, right? Around, it's usually around Monday Night Football, just saying. We have a Monday night date night every Monday, right?
So I know what you were doing last night.
Absolutely. Actually, my husband's traveling, so we take it the next available time. But it's It's, you know, it's you do that, you know, and people say, you schedule sex? And I'm like, yes, anything important in my life is in my calendar. Yeah. And so I make it doesn't have to be sex, but it does have to be sexy. It does have to be intimate. So I tell people, don't go to the new Star Wars movie, go to the new Star Wars movie without panties, right? Can you find a way to be sexy? Right, and that's you,
yeah, absolutely.
right?
And I think that a lot of the things that are problems is that we're not carbon cutouts anymore like we were in the 40s and 50s. A man's role is not in this box, and a woman's is not in this box. The lines are completely blurred. A man, like we were just saying earlier before the show, has to chop wood and write poetry and be sensitive and do all of these things, and their lines are blurred too. And we are doing way more than we used to do before because now we're taking on extra jobs. I had 4 jobs at one point, so it's impossible. And like that's the last thing on your mind. I'm peddling sex, and it's the very last thing on my mind because I was exhausted, right? So, but the attitude of putting yourself first is still, there's a stigma attached to that. So if I say, I really want to make myself happy today, I'm going to eat what I want, do what I want, there's like this whole, well, the kids need shoes and this needs to be done, and that, and if mommy's not happy or I'm not happy, the whole world's not happy. So you've got to stop and check in.
And I really preach date nights. I really do. I think that, you know, people, you know, you have small kids and it's a low period sexually, and I know how hard that is. You know, I've been there. But I think if you don't really make the effort, right? People spend their time planning their holidays or doing their thing. Most people are not mindful about their sexual life, as again, which permeates, takes brain space in the whole course of your day. And if you don't give it some energy, you know, like I said, you can spend your whole time thinking of dealing with your kids and whatever, but if you don't focus on your relationship, your kids are going to be in a single parent family anyway. So do the work, right? And it's hard because people come, and sometimes it's too little, too late. But it's you know, it's usually not the love. It's usually, you know, people get divorced. Big reasons people break up is they get married to spend their life with somebody and they're not there. You know, it's money, it's, you know, meddling families, it's, honestly, it's division of labor, but a lot of it's about sex. And, you know, you haven't broached on the whole, you know, I spent my whole summer doing the Ashley Madison fallout, and Ottawa's considered, you know, in the world, top numbers in the world, you know, and that's what happens, right? You start to get positive attention from somebody else. You know, it's if you don't have time to connect, you know, that's what happens, and those feelings of betrayal run deep. It's hard.
Now, pop culture tells us that it's often the woman who has the problem with libido, but the fact of the matter is that we're seeing men have a problem with libido at a much younger age than ever before. I know from personal experience, some of my girlfriends, friends of friends, are going through divorces. They're in their 30s because the women want sex and the men are simply not interested. And again, it's not something you can really treat with a blue pill at that young age. And I was actually reading in Marie Claire magazine that a woman in France successfully sued her husband, her ex-husband, for not having sex with her. And France's highest court actually ruled in her favor and awarded her $15,000, saying that, you know, sex is imperative in a relationship, in a marriage.
Right. Well, I mean, I know it might sound bad, but I kind of look at it as a job. So, and that's one of your tasks in your job, right? And it can be, and that can run the gamut of all the different types of sex, but being intimate with your partner and taking time out for that person, if you don't do your job at work, you get fired, right? And so if you don't go down the checklist of all the stuff that you're supposed to do, check in with your partner, emotionally check in, physically check in, do all those things, and then it's easy to lose sight of that. And I can see why she could. I mean, I'd give her 15 grand for that, for sure. She could buy a lot of stuff with that.
Well, yeah, it's you know, it's an 80-20, right? 80% of the time of people who have low libido, it's honestly women. 20% of the time it's men, but I'm seeing more and more and more men. And again, they're stressed out. Often their testosterone is tanked, you know, you do their blood work, and the good news is, you know, often you can go on testosterone if you hit the markers for what the Canadian Urological Association says you can go on testosterone, and it improves things in like literally a month.
This is a hormone supplement?
This is a hormone supplement, because oftentimes you're so stressed, right? I see a lot, I had guys who are, you know, who are these, you know, big jobs, like really big jobs, and constantly stressed, and their cortisol levels are through the roof, and it's a balance, and if you don't feel it, it's really, really difficult to find that, and it's stigmatized for guys. I was saying, you know, it's hard on guys. Get hard, stay hard, you know, climax, not too fast, not too early, have some game, initiate, and I really feel badly. I have lots of guys who are paralyzed about initiating sex or avoid it because they're worried that something's going to go wrong, and it's so fraught with stuff. So sexual anxiety is fast becoming the number one thing I'm seeing men for. because they're so worried about it.
And I think they don't get a chance to really talk about how sensitive they are either, because there's a stigma attached to that as well, right? And I think that we just sort of say, well, man, they're simple. Their needs are very easy. They wake up in the morning, they think, did I have sex? They go to sleep at night. Did I have sex? Oh, what a nice day. But it's not that simple. And they are really quite sensitive creatures. But we bash that out of them when they're younger. You're a boy, don't cry. Stop, don't emote your feelings. And that squashes down really early at an early age, and it just translates as you get older. And then they don't talk to each other, which makes it worse. So there's this problem, like how are you going to get to the core, like Sue's saying, and what if it's physiological? What if it's psychological? Who are they going to talk to? Because there's a tremendous amount of stigma saying, I'm just not feeling it. Well, how could you not feel it? You got this hot woman here.
No,
doesn't make any sense.
It's, and there's a lot, in all fairness, there's a lot of, I think I've been talking to guys about sex for well over 20 years, and some days I'm still gobstopped at how horny guys are. And I think women have no idea. However, they're more than Neanderthals. They're more than that. And there's they run like all women. They run the gamut from really marshmallow gooey guys to, hey baby, I got the equipment. This is what I need morning, noon, and night. So it's about finding a place where they can, where they can talk about it.
Right.
And
someplace safe.
Someplace safe.
Yeah, where they feel safe. It's important.
Valentine's Day is around the corner. What are some good tips that you ladies have for those who are maybe re-entering the dating game after being out of it for a long time?
Don't put any pressure on Valentine's Day, because if you're with somebody who has to wait till Valentine's Day to tell you how they feel, move on.
Anti-Valentine's Day, yeah.
Not on it.
But there's a lot of people who are starting, in dating, and I said at any given time there's, almost 38%. You got the new stats about the region. I was like, oh, what do you mean? How many singles and over 18 in this area? And it's a big thing, right? And I used to tell people, online was great. Up until a few years ago, online was really a great place, and now I think it's fraught with a lot of fraud. I think it's fraught with, it's not as great. So I'm like, you need to figure out, where you get to meet people and what's there. I like the meetup groups. I think that, find one, go on meetups.com, find a group, right? You can be ukulele lovers, or there's a Not Your Mother's Book Club, or, whatever your interest is, and find people who are passionate. I saw that with the election, right? If you're passionate about something, I had a whole bunch of people hook up over that because they're with somebody that they feel passionate about, and they have the group, and they're connecting.
Absolutely.
But I think Valentine's Day is your moment in time where you can say, I picked you, to your partner, which means make an effort. Don't just slide around it. Say, I picked you, I do it again, because it's your opportunity to do that. But it's about, it's about doing the thing. My favorite story is I had a girlfriend who didn't have, sort of in school, didn't have a lot of money, and her boyfriend said, I'm going to take you for a walk, and it's winter, it's Valentine's Day, and she was like, no. It turns out, no, so he insisted. He had driven her out to a place, and he in the woods, and already been there, the wine's chilling. He'd had a picnic basket. He had the fire all ready to go, lit it, sat her down with a blanket. And that was her Valentine's gift. And everybody hears this story, they're like, oh, and it wasn't a lot of money. It was the effort. And I say to people, that's what you do. Go the chocolate bar you buy at the gas station, and get the chocolate, get the strawberries and dip them in and feed them to her. Do something that means something. It doesn't mean, a dozen roses. It means I would do this all over again.
And what's romantic to that person too, right? Because latex is romantic to some people and not to everyone.
Yes,
I personally don't. I sweat too much.
Yeah.
It's not my thing.
We're almost at the end of the show. I wanted to ask you, Jasmine, where can we find your book?
In Ottawa, it is currently sold out. Woohoo! Happy to say.
Yeah,
so
good
you
for
can
you.
get it. Thank you on Kobo and Kindle online, and it will be available again at on my website. I've got a whole list of places where it will be available right now. There's just no copies.
Yeah, and a girl. Way to go on that.
And Sue, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sexwithsue.com, right? Sexwithsue.com. It gives you all the stuff about that. You can have a look at the ducklings if you're looking for date nights. You can, you can find out how all that's going, and send me an email if you have a question about a friend. I'm happy to field that. Right? Say you saw me here, and I will definitely take time to answer your email.
Sounds great. Well, it's been a real pleasure having you ladies on tonight. Thank you so much. It's a great discussion. Really enjoyed it. Make sure that you come back next week for my show on getting a head start on spring cleaning. I'll be doing a show on how to declutter your life and your wardrobe. Thank you so much for watching tonight. See you next week.
Great.